Hey, New Minds Nation. Hello. This is Ben here, co-founder and CEO of New Minds, and of course, host of the New Minds podcast. We're here today with another episode, another lovely conversation we're about to have about an extremely urgent topic. Our guest today is Sarah Sampson. Sarah started her career as an educator and was the social emotional learning facilitator for Keller ISD in the Dallas area, and she led a district-wide implementation of social emotional learning and mindfulness-based activities that impacted over 34,000 students. She is trained in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program through UC San Diego Medical School, a very well-known and reputable program. She's a certified social emotional learning, restorative practices, and yoga teacher. And she's been developing training, curriculum, and workshops to empower educators, kids, and humans of all kinds. Her newest project is called Art of the Circle, which hopefully we'll get to talk about as well. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I'm super delighted to have you here today.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Super happy to be here too. I'm always thankful to get to talk about the things that spark my heart and that I'm passionate about, and hoping to talk a little bit too about Present Moment Labs and the projects that we've been working on. And hopefully if you're listening, whether you're an educator or a parent, or you're just curious what's needed for children in the world right now, that you glean something from this experience. And actually, before we get started, before we do anything else, Ben, I'd love to do an opening practice. Is that okay with you? Great.
Let's model, yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that we can dig into in social emotional learning is that we're concerned with building a container for our full human selves to show up in our schools and in our Zoom rooms or wherever it is that we're doing our learning. To build a container where we feel safe, where we feel like we belong, and we feel like we can really show up. And we know that our brains, right, they don't take on new information unless we feel safe. And so starting off, I want to show you some of these cards that we've been developing with Present Moment Labs, because they're a really great way to bring in these opening practices, closing practices, and engaging strategies. I picked a card for us, Ben, because I think it would help us out. It's called Inhale Confidence, Exhale Doubt. It's a test-taking card.
Yeah.
I know we're not taking a test, but I mean, we're kind of on camera. I know there's nerves.
Yeah,
all these that come along with it. So I thought it might be good for us.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do, and you're welcome if you're listening, just to hop in and have this experience with us, is we'll find a seat of some comfort. So maybe putting our feet on the floor. Yeah. And we'll just show up. We'll arrive in this space together by feeling those feet on the floor, maybe allowing the shoulders to drop away from the ears, and either closing our eyes, or if it feels safer just to look away from the screen, please do so. And you can just let your palms rest in your lap, and then maybe notice any places on the body that could be at ease, just 10% more, like maybe relaxing the jaw or relaxing the spaces between the eyebrows. And from here, we'll just take in a long, deep breath and gently let it out. And as we take a breath in, we're going to breathe in, I am confident. You can just say it in your own mind. And as you breathe out, you can say out with doubt. And then maybe just simply breathing in confidence and breathing out doubt. Confidence in, doubt out. And then tying any words that feel good, like maybe breathing in hope, letting out fear, And then maybe just taking in one more deep breath in together. And if you like, you can just sigh it out. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes to greet back the screen.
Wow. Okay, Sarah, I'm ready to take on the world. Is it too late to run for president? Because I feel like I could handle that right now. Like I'm really, no, actually, seriously, like that is powerful. And what you've done is you've modeled a way that we can set a framework of safety. Because as you said, that's going to be the foundation for any meaningful learning that would take place inside this frame. So
sure.
It seems so simple.
Yeah.
It seems so simple, but it's something forgotten in the learning environment, in all environments. I think every meeting should be kicked off with something like this and framed like this, right?
Yeah, we adults, we need to feel safe and feel like we belong to, and like we can bring our full human selves in the door. And it reminds me, as you were saying that, you know, one of my teachers, who I'll talk about a little bit later, says we're not going to solve the world's problems or change the world through breathing, but we're not going to solve the world's problems or change the world without taking a lot of deep breaths along the way. So this essential nature of taking the time to stop and breathe before making a decision, or simply to soothe the self, and simply to show up.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks for
in
that.
the course of this conversation, we're going to get lots of insights and tools about that. I want to give you an opportunity to talk a bit about your journey. Now, you and I have a lot in common. We both love mindfulness. I went through the mindfulness certification training program with you as an instructor. We both have our roots in education as well. Like in our heart of hearts, we're teachers. So, can you talk a little bit about how you started your journey as a teacher? I think you were a theater arts teacher, elementary school. What was it that happened during that time? What insights did you have during that time that led you on this part of the journey?
So many of us who have found our way, sort of the stream of livingness that brought us to where we are. And I think the first step along that way is a love for children. And I think that's really where it began. My background is in a lot of theater. And so really that was just a ticket to get me in the classroom with kiddos. And I actually started in a school, their first theater arts program for kindergarten through fourth graders, which was an absolute blast. And I realized right away when I got in the classroom with those terrific to make any Meryl Streeps out. I started to notice that I had the opportunity to teach a lot of tools around expression, how it is that we express our emotions, how we identify them on other people. And really, I began noticing with my children how much little things like eye contact, like looking people in the eye and seeing them, recognizing them, being with them, communicating, connecting.
Hey, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
And playing with this idea of how to practice the art of being human together. And I was studying mindfulness quite a bit at the time. So I was also working quite a bit on teaching some tools for them to manage these big emotions as they come up. And around that time, someone had gifted me a book by this teacher I spoke of earlier. Her name's Meena Srinivasa, and she had a book called Teach, Breathe, Learn. And I read the book, and inside the book, I saw the word for the first time, or the set of words, social emotional learning. And I thought, that's it. That's what I do. And fast forward, right? This commitment to exploring this idea of social emotional learning and actively working at the time to create exercises and even trainings at conferences while I was still teaching, to actually take this idea of what it means to build our social emotional learning skills and practically bring it into the classroom. And so I made my way into the social emotional learning department, which was brand new when I started, and eventually had a team of teachers. We went into the schools and implemented some of the practices we'll chat about today to very, very practically create containers where these skills, because I truly believe they're skills, these social emotional learning practices and skills could be brought into the classroom. And now I'm having such a blast, really, truly, working for Present Moment Labs and developing these practices for beyond my Keller ISD scope and into schools nationwide. A lot of my struggle during that time of being a social emotional learning facilitator, which, by the way, facilitator, facil means to make easy. And so that was really my task around that time, was how can I make this easy for teachers? How can I make it easy? And so that's still very much my goal today, is to teach these skills to adults, because I completely believe they need to possess them first, but to make it very easy for them to bring it into the classroom, because Ben, you've been there. You know that one more thing on the plate is the last thing that they need. And so that's been kind of my journey.
Yeah, because, there's this gut reaction teachers can have these days with like one more acronym. It's like, Sarah, please, no more acronyms in the classroom. But this is way more than an acronym. This is essential. This is urgent for all the reasons you were describing. It's this basic human connection. It's this framework for optimized learning. It's all these things that are just the baseline. If we want higher order thinking, if we want innovation and creativity down the line, then the foundation that we have to establish is the social emotional learning. And what you've done, and just a little bit of transparency, I want to fully disclose that New Minds absolutely loves Present Moment Labs, and we are partners. So full disclosure, we are partners with Present Moment Labs, but just rest assured, even if we weren't, it would be my absolute honor to be talking to Sarah right now. So, and what you've done is exactly like you said. You've made it so easy for teachers, of course, but also parents to have these tools at the ready so easily. Like you were holding up the cards, right? It's as easy as having a card in front of you with a very simple practice that you can guide anyone through. A little side note, on Saturday, we were delivering a teacher training via Zoom to about 40 teachers, and I guided them through 3 different practices using the cards, and they were just like impacted immediately. They understood immediately. They wanted to know, like, how can I do this? And it wasn't even a social emotional learning training. So all right, so your story arc a little bit, you were in the classroom, you were having these insights, noticing these things about human connection with the kids and how important it was, and setting this framework. Before we move on, and I know you're not a neuroscientist, and that's fine, so the disclaimer's there, but can you talk a little bit more about why this framework that you talked about earlier is so important for learning, and why we're calling it urgent, maybe even especially especially in the time of pandemic? Why is it even more urgent to establish this learning framework from a neurological or physiological point of view?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you said, I'm not a neuroscience, but I am a fascinated person with the brain and how the brain works, just because I'm fascinated with what it is to be human. And this seems to be one of our greatest tools, this brain. So the model that I've worked with quite a bit with teaching children about the brain and social emotional learning is actually Dan Siegel's model. He uses a hand model of the brain. And so what he describes using actually the hand to model the brain is that if you curl your thumb in and you wrap your fingers around, your fingers would represent your prefrontal cortex, which is the front brain, sometimes called the most human part of our brain, the most developed part of our brain. And it's the place where we store our higher order thinking, our information, our vocabulary words, the way to solve math equations, but also these higher order human skills like empathy and compassion. Our capacity for that is here in that prefrontal cortex. And practices like mindfulness, for example, actually build that part of our brain. We're actually growing matter in that brain, which is interesting that they've been able to identify through fMRIs and brain scans. Back to that later. But essentially, when we go into a state of stress, and that stress can be major. It can also be quite minor, like having to log on to your Zoom and the password isn't working and you're late to class, right? We all know how that goes these days. So the prefrontal cortex, when we go into a state of stress, actually turns off. We call it flipping the lids. If you flipped your fingers up from your fist in this hand model, the prefrontal cortex turns off and we begin thinking with this smaller part of our brain, the amygdala. And the amygdala, sometimes they call it the reptilian brain. It's really our instinctual fight or flight nature. And when we're in real danger, we can be so thankful to that amygdala for kicking in and giving us really the adrenaline, the cortisol to create physical safety for ourselves, defending or getting out of there as soon as possible, or even freezing. But that amygdala turning on completely disconnects us from our ability to reason, to connect. And another interesting thing that's happening neurologically there is that hippocampus, which is the part of our brain that stores our memory, therefore our wisdom. And it actually switches off from being a recorder of memory and into the functional part of our brain that was releasing that cortisol or that stress hormone. So when we're in states of stress, and like I said, they can be those hits of stress, but they can also be daily just working and living with anxiety of being in a present moment experience where we're dealing with let's just face it, a lot of unknown. We're facing the unfaced, and this causes stress to little ones and big ones alike, right? Adults and children. And so we can start to live with our lids flipped. And this not only makes it difficult for us to remember our vocabulary words and our timetables and our academic way of being, but it actually makes it difficult for us to connect. It makes it hard for us to not just reach the front part of our brains, but to reach our hearts, to reach our empathy, to reach our compassion. And so these practices, both in mindfulness and SEL, and I see them very interrelated, they're skills to bring us back online, to bring that prefrontal cortex back, to create safety inside the brain, which the brain, is communicating to the body. So it's creating safety inside this body, this human vehicle that we're in, so that we can not only learn, but that we can thrive. So
yeah, I love that. Sometimes the way I frame it is like, okay, we're in these miraculous bodies that have evolved into these, impeccable machines designed to keep us alive in so many conditions. But if we're entering a situation where we're primed to be running from the bear or escaping the flood or whatever it may be, that's the exact opposite of where we need to be in a social context, in a learning context. And so if there are tools that I love the hand model, by the way, it's so beautiful. And to relate it directly to kids as well, what a wonderful way to give them some understanding of brain function, right? But if there are tools, if we enter the classroom like this, whether it's Zoom or physical, and there are tools that can help us just gently close that, so we're back here in the front of our brains. I mean, that is beautiful. That is essential, and that is urgent, right? Back to one of our themes for today. Absolutely. So, okay. What challenges do you find when you're trying to communicate this to the teachers and other adults? What kind of resistance do you get, maybe? I mean, you were in a big school district and you had the title, right? You had the title. You were the SEL expert and you were authorized to go implement. Did you find that once teachers are exposed and understand and experience it, that they're kind of open and they understand the value?
Oh, such a great question. Such a great question. Yeah, the importance of starting with the adults is something that I really stress to the teachers and the leaders, really, who are working with the teachers now. We can't teach what we don't know. We shouldn't expect our teachers to. And our teachers don't feel safe if they aren't in staff meetings where they're being invited to bring their whole human identities in the door. How can they expect to create that space for children if they aren't practiced in managing themselves, managing their emotions, developing their self-awareness or their relationship skills? How can we expect them to teach them to their students? We wouldn't expect a math teacher to teach an equation that she's never learned how to solve. And so really starting with the adults and earning their buy-in and earning their trust through connecting to them and bringing these exercises into staff meetings was really where I started and found the most success. And the other part was really just taking it out of the philosophical framework and condensing it into these practices was very helpful, so that they could see that I wasn't putting one more thing on their plate, but instead offering them a plate to put everything on top of. And so the way that I really began to create that plate for teachers in CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, who I walked step in step and continue to, they are the research body behind a lot of this work, and we're so thankful for that. But their suggestion for bringing these things into schools in a really practical way, and it works. I've watched it work. Are those three essential practices that we mentioned in the beginning. So the first is beginning the learning with a welcoming and inclusion practice. Now, when I say beginning the learning, that might be the beginning of the school day in an in-person environment, or if we're getting on a Zoom together, say as we did, it's the beginning of our Zoom call. If you're a secondary teacher and you've got 5 classes a day, it's a welcoming practice for each class that you begin. And what this welcoming practice does, it's a lot of times we use check-in strategies, and the check-in strategy is twofold. It works on the self-awareness core competency of SEL, which is turning inward, turning those pedals inward and saying, okay, how am I doing? How am I feeling right now? And then the relationship skill of expressing that emotion out. So building that emotional vocabulary to unlock that key inside of us so that we can be seen and felt and heard, which was what we're so craving as humans. And then the social awareness, where we begin to see how others are feeling, how that might be the same or different from how we're feeling, how we can feel connection and empathy and compassion through seeing ourselves in the mirror of. And it gives the teacher a lot of information in that moment around who's hungry, who's tired, who got in a fight with their mom in the car on the way over, and how we can have patience, right, as these students are bringing themselves in the door. So those welcoming and inclusion practices, whether it's taking time to connect with the self through breathing, through movement, or taking the time to connect with a community through allowing our voice to be heard by at least one other person. So that's either pairing with a partner or speaking out loud in a group. In elementary schools, we see circles, these morning meetings, they're often called. And a lot of my work lately in my art of the circle has been this practice of creating these circles for connecting as a vehicle for creating belonging at the very beginning of our experience. And these practices, they can take 30 seconds. They can be just show me with a thumbs up, right? Where are you right now? They can be verbal and nonverbal, or they can take as long as 10 minutes to let everyone go around and share. So that's that first practice. And there's really infinite ways to take the moment before starting and diving into content to create welcome and inclusion for the students in the classroom. The second essential practice looks at how these are really threaded in through the thumbprints of everyday teaching and learning. So this looks at how we're transitioning from one activity to the other. Are we taking time to reflect and reset before trudging forward from one topic to the next? Are we allowing time for brain breaks, right? To get up and move, to sit still and breathe? Are we aware of how to upregulate and downregulate our classrooms? So if they're tired and sluggish after lunch, is there an activity that we can lift their energy with? Or if they're running wild after recess and it's time to switch to math, do we know how to downregulate that energy? Engaging strategies also look at our connections to academic learning and also how we're running this model of discipline and hopefully moving to showing our students that their mistakes are opportunities for learning rather than opportunities for punishment, and how to move to a more restorative approach.
Yeah,
that's a rabbit hole I could get into. Maybe not right now. And then the last practice, just briefly, is this optimistic closure. So this works with the idea that, the last moment of our experience, whether it's the last few seconds of our Zoom call or the end of our school day, our brain does this little silly thing where it associates those last few moments with the entire experience. So if the last few moments were chaotic and stressful, we're like, that whole experience was chaotic and stressful, even if it wasn't. So this is really inviting educators and leaders to intentionally carve and pause for that last, even just 30 seconds, that last minute, to do something positive and to leave that last bite as something quite sweet so that we can build this positive relationship and association to learning. And so making these really easy, these cards, just going back to them, it's like just I'm going to pull a card to use as my opening practice. I'm going to pull a card to use as my optimistic closure, so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel every day as we come in and come out of our learning environments.
Sarah, I really love how you framed the metaphor of the plate, because you're exactly right. There's this kind of fatigue that teachers get year after year. They'll roll into a new school year and the district will be implementing a new curriculum or a new program, and it's just one more thing that's piled and piled. And so there's a kind of a built-in skepticism or fatigue that sets in. But I love the way you framed it. It's like, listen, educator, teacher, I'm not piling on your plate. I'm going to create a beautifully supportive plate that you can place your other things on, and it's going to hold it for you. It's going to hold that space for you. And that's exactly like you said. And then for me, that's the genius of what you've done at Present Moment Labs, because listen, it's like you said, at the bare minimum, if all I have time for is to just grab 3 cards for that day, and I show up to class with my 3 cards ready to go, I've already done wonders for my classroom environment, right? But at best, you also have more elaborate materials available, including a 60-page teacher guide with planning templates and background information. You want to talk a little bit more about what went into the Present Moment Labs like teaching guide? I mean, that's some serious stuff, Sarah. I've seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Since we're kind of transitioning a little bit to talk about the guide, how about we do an engaging strategy?
Yeah.
What do you think? Just to transition, acknowledge that we're making a transition right now.
And can I just, before you start, Sarah, I just want to highlight, you just modeled it. But as you were talking about the middle practice, the transition practice, I was thinking, because you were talking about knowing when to upregulate, knowing when to downregulate. Talk about a moment when the educator, him or herself, needs that social emotional awareness of their classroom, of their students, to know which practice is most appropriate for that moment. And just like you read the energy of this moment and where I was and where we were, you're like, oh yeah, now's the time. And we'll see which practice you select too. I'm curious.
Yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head, and it's true that social awareness is needed from the teacher to see her classroom and say what's needed here. But before that can even happen, the self-awareness has to occur, because often the teacher might need to upregulate or downregulate herself. You know, if he or she is exhausted after lunch. That might be needed to get her own energy up. Or if that very human thing that happens, and I know those educators listening, yet I know you've never gotten worked up or upset in the classroom, but just a little tip if you happen to one day, how to downregulate yourself, because we know that a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a child. It just doesn't work. And when we talk about the guide, we can go a little bit more into this importance of the adult practice as well. But just as our little transition right now, I think that I'll go ahead and do 5 in, 7 out breathing. This breathing card. This breathing card is a down regulation card. And I'm picking this one as I'm trying to stay calm and focused while I feel very much in the spotlight. So this is helpful. And what this focuses on is elongating the exhale. And so this isn't magic, right? This is science.
Well, kind of. Sometimes there's no difference.
That's right. I like that. So this magic science is when we elongate our exhale, there is a vagus nerve, or our vagus nerve is our 13th cranial nerve, and it sends a message to our vagus nerve, which allows the brain and therefore the body to feel safe. It activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, versus our sympathetic nervous which is our fight or flight. We're going to turn that system on, that rest system, through elongating our exhale. So what we can do, and I'll just count for us, is wherever we are, we can just let go of all of our breath. So just let it out. And then let's breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale slowly for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale slowly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we'll just let our breath return to normal. So that's just a quick one. You can do it as many times as you need as an adult, for yourself, or as a kiddo. I love breath practices. I always tell my kids that they're the ninja way to calm yourself down, because you can be doing it and no one even knows, right?
Jedi training, secret Jedi training.
Yeah, I'm over here preventing my own meltdown and you don't even know. So yeah, those are good ones to have in the pocket. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this guide. And what I really see in the guide itself is really providing the foundation for the teacher to really understand for themselves the definition of both mindfulness and social emotional learning, and to begin to step into this idea that, yes, it's what we do. It's the practices that we bring into our classrooms. But more than anything, it's who we are. It's how we show up. And so there's a big emphasis in this of how we can take care of ourselves to make sure that we're modeling social emotional skills for those wide open listeners, those sponges that are the children in the classroom. So bringing SEL and mindfulness together, the way that I see it, and it's articulated in the guide, is that mindfulness is this foundation for social emotional learning. So the pause, which mindfulness focuses on, this pause, this breath before making a decision or when facing a strong emotion. It's the pause that brings us to the first core competency in social emotional learning, self-awareness. So that pause to tune in, check in. What's real right now? Right now it's like this. How am I feeling? So that's the self-awareness. That's step one, where we then can move into self-management. Mindfulness gives us the tools to manage our stress, to manage our strong emotions so that we can respond to our feelings rather than react with them in a healthy way. And with being able to be aware of my emotions and manage my emotions, then I'm able to have social awareness, which is where I can begin to recognize the feelings of others and respond appropriately to them. If I notice my teacher is getting incredibly frustrated, I can probably name that for myself and decide that I might need to adjust myself accordingly. Hopefully, that's what we're working on. And once we can recognize the feelings of others, then we can begin to develop the fourth SEL competency, which is our relationship skills. So this is how we're able to both build and maintain healthy relationships, how we're able to collaborate within groups and with each other, and how we really can connect at an emotional level. And the final one is responsible decision making, which is how we respond instead of react to our environment, to others, to our own internal world, into situations. And bringing it kind of back to the urgency is that these are the things. If we can get these kiddos out of our systems with these things, my life will have been made.
Yeah. Wow.
How do we move out of survival and into thrival, right? This is really what I see right now is needed for both children and adults to thrive. And now more than ever, I mean, I'm just going to say it, times are wild, times are difficult, especially in our education system. And it's always been needed. These things have always been needed, but they're needed now more than ever. And right now, this message, I mean, I know that 10-year-olds maybe probably likely not watching this. I'm speaking to you adults. We need this, adults. We need this. Yeah. We need this. This is for our kiddos, but it is also for us. We've been told our whole lives, calm down. I always ask, has anyone here ever been told to calm down? Usually everyone raises their hand. Everybody. It's like, did that ever work for you? Yeah, I don't think so. We've been told our whole lives, calm down, stop crying, pull yourself together. And yet no one ever told us how to calm down. No one ever said, here's some tools. Maybe they did. Maybe we were lucky. I can tell you I was not in my school system. No one was telling me how to calm down. They told me I was told to calm down a lot, but no one ever told me how. And in these times that are so difficult, we need tools. We need practices. Empathy is a skill. Exercising compassion is a skill. Managing our big emotions, it's a skill. We can't expect ourselves as adults nor our children to have these things without practicing them. So all that to say, within the guide itself, some of the things that we look at are the ways that we're starting the SEL and the mindfulness with ourselves. SEL and mindfulness start with you adult. And one of the things that we have are these self-care practices for adults. And these are mindfulness-based practices where they can regulate themselves before going in and working in the classroom. We talked about the SEL 3 essential practices, but within the guide itself, we provide a planner so that educators and parents can really intentionally plan their days for social emotional learning. And in this planner, one of the things that we suggest is actually before the school day, how you're, as an adult, planning to do a self-care practice for yourself. Then once you move in, either to the virtual or the in-person classroom, how you're doing a welcoming practice for your students. Throughout the day, engaging strategies, how you're connecting to your students, but also how you're connecting and caring for yourself. Closing the day with your students, how you're doing that optimistically and intentionally, but then after school, how you're intentionally caring for and connecting to yourself. And these things are deeply interrelated. Teaching is such personal work. It's so personal, so vulnerable, and it requires our whole selves, and how challenging and beautiful that can be. So the guide itself goes through each of the cards and gives extension exercises, connections to academic learning, as well as ideas of how to get kids sharing and talking about their experiences, because we know that's part of the big practice is being able to connect and share socially around what's going on inside and around us. But really, it's a way to hold the educator's hand to not just doing social emotional learning, but becoming social emotional learning. In so many ways, I think that we believe as teachers, when we have a new thing to do, we're going to put the social emotional learning hat on and do our 30-minute lesson on self-awareness or whatever it is, and then we take that hat off and we go back to teaching.
I love how in the guide and now in this conversation you've taken so much time to emphasize that idea that we have to start ourselves as the adults, that we really have to embody it at a deep level. Anyone who's ever taught before, especially little ones, knows that kids are like empathic attunement machines. You cannot fake it. If you have any emotional turbulence and you put on the greatest porcelain smile of all time, they don't buy it. Like, they read right through it, right?
It's so true. It's so true, Ben. I mean, this was a huge awakening for me. My first year teaching, the responsibility I have for my own inner world, and how I would just walk into a hall of mirrors, right?
Yeah. Yes.
My anxiety, yes. I walk in, 25 children with anxiety. My joy, my inner calm, I walk in, joy and inner calm.
Yes.
Like, wow, I have to be radically responsible for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why it has to start with the adults. Hence, so much energy and attention in the guide to helping the educator or the parent start with themselves, establish kind of like that core of their own social emotional learning. And then it's just almost second nature. I mean, you still have to plan and think through and be responsive. But once you're really embodying it, I think part of empathy is the art of being able to know what may help a person in front of you. So that's why, and the cards, I know that they're beautiful and they're kid friendly, but I was in a lunch meeting the other day and we pulled out some cards and just did them amongst ourselves adults, right? And it was beautiful. It was a perfect thing for the moment. It got everyone back in sync, everyone more present, and just powerful. I want to take a slight left turn that you probably weren't ready for. So I've been something on my mind a lot lately. I don't know if you've seen this new documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Yeah. So for those who haven't, a super quick synopsis. Some of the OGs, some of the original founders of the big tech companies have had kind of an about face about some of the technology that they created and its implications in terms of privacy and wellness and social emotional well-being. I mean, they don't use that term in the documentary, but really the essence of it is we're kind of in a social emotional crisis spurred on and spawned by this technology. And so I'm wondering, in my big picture mind, which I like to think kind of globally, we have this one force is kind of like this social media machine and AI and these algorithms who are sort of like bifurcating us right down the middle and polarizing and showing us doubt and insecurity. And for me, there might be political answers to that, absolutely. Regulations, there's things the industry could or should do. I'm not here to talk about that. For me, social emotional learning, mindfulness, this is the antidote. If, the vision that you had a minute ago, Sarah, of every student walking out of school with those 5 competencies, the problem's over. I'm stretching a little bit maybe, but imagine if every young person were able to realize and embody those 5 competencies of social emotional learning. They would be bulletproof. They would be bulletproof to social media, right? And so, some of the statistics that they, especially in regards to suicide in young people, just devastating. And so I don't know if you've had a chance to reflect on that. I know you're a very heartfelt, deep thinker about these things. I wonder if you want to respond to that right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I haven't watched The Social Dilemma yet, but it's waiting for me. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot for myself and my own relationship to social media. If you're watching this, you may have found it on social media, so you're on there. And we all have this interesting dance that we're doing with this technology. And pre-COVID, one of the things I was really focused on as my why for social emotional learning was this idea that the children that we're educating right now are a part of the I generation. Are you familiar with this term?
Just vaguely. Could you elaborate?
Vaguely. What really turned me onto it was this book. And the title of the book is, it's by Jean Twenge. And she wrote this book that's called iGen, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood, and what that means for the rest of us. Super long book title. I just had to look it up so I could remember every word. But this book had a huge impact on me at the time that I read it, because it showed the American psychological data that has compared basically teens generationally since the early 1960s. And so it's comparing apples to apples to apples, data from teens from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s today. And what they was data that absolutely just broke my heart then, and became a lot of my fire, which is that today's children, so the I generation is considered post 1994. So those who were born after 1994. So those are the children in today's classrooms. I call them the iGen because it's a little I, like iPhone, iPad. They're the first generation to never know a world without technology. And that brings them a really unique set of skills and challenges. And a lot of those challenges are around mental health. And I used to give presentations in high school and just tell the teens some of this data and just get their thoughts on it. And they would nod so knowingly with me. And the first piece of data is that this generation is the least happy generation in documented history, the most stressed generation in documented history. And we don't need a bunch of data for them to tell you that. But the one that gets me, Ben, the one that's like, is they report to be the most lonely generation in documented history. And that just broke my heart. And I've obviously, since COVID, I used to be really like, technology, no, human skills. And I can really see now how technology can be our ally if we use it like the tool it is. The tool of the I generation is technology. And the tool of, say, the caveman was fire. And I see technology very much like fire, and treating it like the tool that it is, and teaching children that it's fire. So fire can be used for a few things, right? It can warm our food. It can be put in lanterns and light our way. It can be put in the center of a pit and we can all gather around it and we can tell our stories. Fire is a fabulous thing. But it can also burn us. It can burn down entire villages. It can cause mass destruction. And I'm over here on the West Coast right now, and I'm been a firsthand witness to the destruction that fire can create. And so my own learning for myself, and what I would like to really work with children right now is that social media technology is a fantastic ally for connection. We have to use it though as a tool that we see the paradox, the full spectrum of how it might affect our human condition. One of the things that's interesting that she talks about in this book is that 75% of the jobs an average elementary school child will work don't exist yet. They don't exist yet. And this I generation, though they have these challenges, they are extremely innovative. They are extremely creative. They're not just thinking outside of the box. They're creating their own box over there. It's not even a box anymore. They're really having to dream big. And we know if a computer can do it, and computers are fantastic at, guess what? Memorizing and regurgitating information, which, guess what? In an industrial model, that's really what we're teaching in schools is memorize information and put it on a test. Computers are going to outdo us across the board on that. And so that skill, not really needed these days. The jobs that are going to be left behind are going to require our human capacity to be creative, to work together, to not memorize data, but communicate it, arrange it, and do something with it. So that's a really roundabout answer to that question, and it's one that I'm continuing to ask: is how can we use these social platforms, this tool of technology in general, to support our humanness, to empower our human evolution, rather than destroy it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with your fire analogy. I mean, that's a beautiful way to conceptualize it and to see it as something actually neutral. It's all about how we utilize it, and that's exactly what technology is, right? So in particular, social media as well. That's beautiful. And thanks for indulging me with kind of an on-the-spot answer like that, which was extremely rich. And so I will list that book in the show notes for anyone watching right now. Also, I'll have a link to that book. I'll have a link to the documentary as well for anyone who wants to go poke around a little. So, okay. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of a dark turn a little bit, but had to be discussed and dealt with, right? We can't avoid the shadows. We have to embrace the shadow.
You cannot. One of the things we've really been exploring lately for myself in social emotional learning is, I pride myself on showing up as bubbly and focusing on positive emotions. But one of the check-ins I've been doing with adults and kids lately is the rose and the thorn. So acknowledging that in any given moment, there's a whole spectrum of human experience, and can we hold both, just like the rose? We have to hold space for those parts that are so difficult and those parts that are so wonderful and so beautiful, and recognize that this emotional diversity, this like bandwidth for feeling, is what makes us so beautifully and terribly human. And we've got to create space for both. And so I love that we're, facing what's real, which is also what's challenging often.
Yeah, I mean, there again is the primacy of mindfulness, like you said, creating that gap. So when we do have awareness on that full spectrum of emotion, when the ones that, we don't consider so beautiful and shiny come up, we can notice them, we can be aware of them, we can accept them, invite them into the house, but we don't have to react to them. We can still have that space where we can add our layer of social understanding. So I love it. from a psychological point of view, of course, you have the Carl Jung talking about the integration of the shadow, and to really be complete human beings, I mean, it's necessary. We can't deny it. So, wow. So this conversation taking some wonderful turns that I hadn't expected either. That's great. But that being said, one of the part of the framework of the SEL system, the three essential practices, is that optimistic closure. And not that I want this conversation to end. I think we could go for many hours, and I could be very enthralled. Maybe do you want to model a closing for us that's an optimistic closure? We can kind of go out on a positive, hopeful note.
Yeah, let's do that. And I love that you say hopeful note, because I was feeling the card that I would like to do is a card called Heart Hopes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so this is a great way to just quickly end on a positive note. And I think it's something that in this moment, I really see it as a map to the heart, to get back into the heart before we carry on our way. So what we can do is settle back into our seat, however that is for us. So maybe just readjusting in any way to make ourselves a bit more comfortable. I just noticed throughout this call, getting excited, I'm holding myself up in a certain way, but making that intentional decisions to just drop in, to drop back and come back into the inner world rather than this outer expressive world. And so with that inner world, I can either choose to close my eyes, and we're always sensitive with children that we give them the option to maybe look down at the floor, look away, being trauma sensitive in that moment. And so what I'll invite you to do is just begin maybe with placing a hand on the center of your chest in the area of your heart. And while we're right here with ourselves, I'll invite you just to think of a heart hope you have for yourself. So this is like a wish. So do you hope for yourself to be happy? To be healthy? Maybe any other hopes you might have for yourself in this moment. Ask you to just imagine someone that you love. Maybe it's a parent or a child, a pet. And then just imagining a heart hope for this person. Do you hope for them to be happy, to be healthy? And then now I'll just ask you to let that person go and imagine someone that you feel neutral towards. So this is someone you don't know very well. Maybe someone you saw at the grocery store earlier today. And from your heart, can you genuinely give them a wish? Give them a hope to be happy, to be healthy. And then we'll the image of that person go from our imagination. And now's the part for the strong hearts in the room. I'm going to ask you to imagine someone who you might have some difficulty with. Maybe this is even someone who's been unkind to you. And just holding steady in that heart space, creating a heart hope for this person too. Maybe imagining yourself saying to them, may you be happy. I hope you're happy. May you be healthy. I hope you're healthy. And then letting that person go. And this last part is just zooming out. So with children, I often suggest that they imagine their whole classroom or their whole school. For us, we could even dream so big as imagining our entire world, our entire country, whatever Zoom level you'd like to reach. Just bring that into your imagination. And right now, just offering that hope. I hope we're happy. I hope we're healthy. And then any other hopes that come to mind. And then together, maybe we can put both hands to our heart if we haven't already, and just take in a big deep breath, maybe feeling the heart expand with the breath in as the chest rises. And on the exhale, we can let our hands drop and our eyes gently open. So there you have it. There's an optimistic closure.
I love it. I love it. You can't get more optimistic and powerful than a good loving kindness reflection like that. Just thank you, Sarah, for guiding us through not just that practice, but the entire conversation, which I felt was so rich and heartfelt and genuine. And just, I'm super grateful that you were here.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to you and to New Minds for really being that listener, that questioner around what's needed in innovation for learners, for children, for adults, as we carry on into these new spaces in our global reality, and finding where education can really meet the moment with as much heart and as much social emotional wellness as possible. So thanks for being such a voice and an advocate in that world, in that space.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Beautifully put. So to learn more about Present Moment Labs and the products, you can go to presentmomentlabs.com/newminds. We have a special site set up for you guys to explore. Learn more about Sarah at artofthecircle.com. Very cool stuff that she's up to. And of course, you can always learn more about New Minds. Actually, we have a new site for our new project, newmindsonline.com. Sarah, I haven't told you much about this, but New Minds has launched this new online training platform, and we're really focusing on that adult care that's first. So we have lots of self-development things like the right next step, facing uncertainty, and some productivity stuff. And that course actually starts with mindfulness. And we have some stuff on how to have genuine engagement in a virtual environment. So we just today, as we record this, we launched it to the public. So super exciting stuff.
So exciting. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And congratulations to all the teachers who get to be a part of that.
I know.
Lucky
right?
one.
Yeah, we're hoping to make a big impact. So awesome, Sarah. Thanks for this. I'd love to have you back on down the line with new projects and new ideas and new things to share. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks so much, Ben, and all you listeners out there.
Okay.
Did we do